Hey, Joe.
Hello, George.
We will get into what we thought of Splash, but I wanted to say this.
What?
Wouldn't this have been better if Jaws showed up?
Jaws? Jaws the shark?
Yeah, who else?
How would that make the movie better?
Cameo. People love cameos from big stars.
I don't think a fake white shark is considered a star.
Are you kidding? There are like 3 sequels. Jaws is box office gold.
What would that even look like? Where would he even be in the picture?
The scene where she eats the lobster.
That scene?
Sure. See, instead of lobster, they should have been served shark. The shark is Jaws, but he's not dead. He jumps up and he starts killing everyone in the restaurant except Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah, especially that snooty old couple.
That's a terrible idea.
No, it's not. They're waiting for their meal at the restaurant, and Tom Hanks says, "Let's get married." And she says, "The shark dinner is here." And Jaws jumps off the plate and says, "You're the dinner, bitch!" and takes a bite at her, but she shivs him, saying, "Not today, motherfucker!" And he goes, "Oh shit, that hurt. Fuck this shit." And leaps over to the next table and rips the head off the guy sitting there, and blood gushes out of his neck just like he struck oil.
That's disgusting.
Let me finish. So the guy shoots his neck blood all over his wife, and in response, she projectile vomits right into Tom Hanks' open mouth. Just barf coming up from her guts, right into Tom Hanks' face hole, while his mouth is open and he gags, and Jaws goes, "A buffet!" and laps up all the vomit and blood and people who have fainted on the floor.
What is the matter with you, man?
Will you listen? Jaws can't breathe outside the water. Plus, he's been stabbed, so he suddenly has a heart attack and dies. And Tom Hanks turns to the camera and goes, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." And before the scene ends, John Candy rushes over and starts jerking off onto the dead shark. Picture it. John Candy jizz all up and down a dead shark. It looks like Miracle Whip's been dumped on the back of Boris Johnson. But here's the best part. The moment Candy busts his nut, Daryl Hannah says, "Ask any mermaid you happen to see, what's the best tuna? Chicken of the sea."
You really think any film studio would have gone with something like this?
No, and that's their loss, Joe. It's their loss.
Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romaka. And today we're discussing Splash from 1984 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook or on Twitter. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 1984.
As I discussed with my co-host, what historical mermaid stories from 1984 am I going to find? Turns out I did find one, but we'll save that for last. We will start with this article from the New York Daily News about the dating woes of 1984. George, the headline, please.
Best mailing address? Honolulu, Newport News.
This piece covers the best places for singles to meet. Topping the list are 2 places you used to live, George. That'd be Honolulu and Virginia. Of course, in 1984, you were a 3-year-old and probably didn't know what Honolulu or Virginia was.
I lived in Newport News.
Okay, even better.
And in Honolulu.
Perfect.
Yeah, just you nailed both.
Well, let me quote from the article. How many times have you heard that the United States is a man's paradise and that single women looking for a single man should go to Australia? Figures released by the ABT Associates, Inc., a social science research firm located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, show there are places closer to home with an abundance of single men. End quote. I was 17 in 1984. I don't recall anybody saying American women should go to Australia. Granted, I think the framing here is for white women, but even so, this doesn't sound familiar to me. What I do recall from that era is that Australia had a lot of Southeast Asian refugees. The Aussies at first weren't too welcoming until the government discovered multiculturalism, something they somehow didn't know about despite the existence of Aboriginals living there before them. But let me read further. It is still true that overall, single women outnumber single men, except in Honolulu, where there is 1 single man for each single woman. Among 20 to 29-year-olds, however, single men outnumber single women in several cities. Newport News, Virginia heads the list with 1.6 single men per single woman, end quote. Now, years later, you would live in these places, George, and at the time you were married, but did you or any of your single friends, male or female, seem to do especially well in those places?
I'm going to ask you, what was my profession when I lived in Honolulu and Newport News?
You're in the Navy.
Question. What do you think the gender skew is for the military?
It's predominantly men, but you told me you served with men and women.
I did serve with men and women. However, why were there more men in those locations or as many men as women in those locations? Because they were military bases.
Ah.
I never had any friends in the Navy who stayed single for long who didn't intend to stay single.
As I remember, because we had a discussion about this years ago, most of the guys and gals, although the women especially, seem to just hook up with other Navy dudes, right? The Navy dudes would date outside the Navy and in the Navy, but women mostly just married other Navy guys?
Yeah, that seems to track based on my recollection.
Of the single guys you knew, were they racking them up? You know? Were they like
they
coming
didn't
back?
Stay single for long if they didn't want to be single. That's all I can say. Like, I don't have statistics or anything, but I'm trying to think back. And even the worst of them found somebody.
Oh, so you're saying they got into committed relationships. They weren't like serially dating or anything.
No, they found wives.
Okay. Well,
with childbearing hips.
Before they found those wives, I wonder how well they made their way through Honolulu and Virginia. I wonder which is a better single. I mean, these days, who knows? It's probably someplace else now. But at the time, I wonder how much of a single scene Honolulu and Newport News were. Like, I mean, Honolulu.
According to this article, it was great. If you were a woman.
Because Honolulu, everyone's running around. I mean, not guys in the Navy, but most people are running around like in the bikinis and stuff, right?
That's not even close to true, Joe. Honolulu is a very large city geographically for the size of the island that it's on. And it's not all beach. There's other inland than beach.
But everyone did wear like waist Hawaiian shirts, right?
There were a lot of Hawaiian shirts, mostly worn by Navy people. As
a military person, it would be Navy whites, right?
In Hawaii, it was always Navy. It was always the whites. Right,
because it's Navy blues for the cold, right. Navy whites for the summer, right?
Right.
Ah, see, I knew that all by myself. You never told me that.
And dust goes through a uniform change at the exact same time that we do.
Huh? What do you mean?
Turns out that the dust, it goes through uniform changes too. Because when you're in your whites, the dust is all like dark colors. When you're in your dress blues, the dust is all light color.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on. In this movie, Daryl Hannah's character comes out of the sea stark naked. This gave me an excuse to look up a couple of public nudity stories from '84.
You needed an excuse?
Generally, I don't need to go back to '84 to look up nudity. Anyway, one story I didn't even know guys got busted for. I'll do that one next. Read the headline for the first story, George. It's also from the Daily News.
The Nude Bomb.
There was a Get Smart movie called The Nude Bomb, but that's got nothing to do with this. Instead, this is about 13 people. It doesn't say here if it was men and women or just one of those, but they showed everything at Reese Park Beach, which is illegal. However, a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn decided to pass on prosecuting them. Turns out this was a state crime, not a federal one, even though the arrest happened in Gateway National Park, which is federal property. You never gone with your stick and berries out while at the beach, have you, George?
Nope.
Neither have I. Let me tell you something. I've never been nude on the beach either, but I have been to Miami Beach, and those bastards got as close to naked as possible there. There was one fat fuck there wearing a thong, and it was all ass. Technically, his butthole was covered, but you couldn't really tell. Gross.
Thanks for that mental image, Joe. I'm sure the audience appreciates it too.
Well, you must have seen a lot of it when you were in Florida. You go down to the beach.
Yeah, but what I don't do is tell other people about it. Because, in their audio medium, describing gross things to people in their ear holes.
Dude, did you pay attention to that cold open I wrote that you've read? I'm well past going gross things. That's where my head is today. Anyway, our next story from 1984 concerns something I never heard of someone getting into trouble with the cops about and going to court for. This is also from the Daily News. Headline, George.
False arrest. Zipper was broke, but he's in the money.
I will now quote, Albany, AP. A man arrested for indecent exposure when the zipper broke on his pants has been awarded $200,000 by a state Supreme Court jury for false arrest. John Citro, 31, said he lost his wife and his job and became addicted to anti-anxiety drugs as a result of the incident. He had sued Mall Properties, Inc. and Janoff and Alsam, Inc., operators of the shopping center where he was arrested, and security officer Paul Hine, who collared him, end quote. I've seen people of various genders with their flies down. Generally, you tell them, and they pull it up. They do, that's it. Back in 84, the cops might arrest you. Granted, the case was dismissed, and the dude sued and got some nice cheddar, but what a weird thing to call indecent exposure. If he pulled it out, I can understand, but just a down zipper? Come on! Which, even back in 1984, the jury agreed. Any thoughts, George?
I don't know. That story seems to be leaving a lot out.
What do you think is being left out?
Like, the zipper broke on his pants, okay. And it happened before he got arrested for indecent exposure. Okay. I'm not sure that the fact of his zipper being down was what got him arrested.
It was. I didn't print the entire article, and people can look at it in the links. But, yeah, a woman complained. She went to the cops and said, "Oh, his zipper's down. I'm very offended.
Oh, not that
disgusting.
He's got a turtle head or anything like that?
Nope, just the zipper is down.
Okay, then. Yeah. And it cost the guy his freaking family.
Instead of going over to the guy saying, "Hey, zip up, buddy. I'm going to arrest you." I don't know. Maybe the cop needed a quota that day, and like this guy was his fifth person he needed to arrest before he could go home. And finally, as promised, Mermaids. George, read the headline that is yet again from the Daily News.
Saw off bronze mermaid's arm.
I will now quote, Copenhagen, AP. Vandals sawed off the bronze right arm of the Little Mermaid statue early yesterday in the worst act of destruction against the sculpture, a Copenhagen landmark since it was decapitated 20 years ago.
Yeesh.
End quote. Holy fuck, they once cut their head off, and here they cut off the arm. Why were people chopping up the Little Mermaid back in the day? What the fuck was that about?
I know, she was white in the cartoon. They didn't have anything to complain about back then.
It's true. Nice white mermaid, and they went and chopped it up. Cut the head off, then 20 years later, cut the arm off. What are you going to do with the arm? Are you going to use it to jack yourself off?
Or, I mean, anything's a butt plug if you're brave enough.
Ooh, a little long for a butt plug, don't you think? And now I got to read this part. The case could fall to the homicide squad, which is in charge of assaults on national monuments. They are still trying to find out who cut off the mermaid's head on April the 25th, 1964. The head has been replaced with a replica, end quote. The homicide squad in 1984 Copenhagen had nothing better to do? The murder rate must have been in the toilet back then. Can you imagine calling homicide for this? Do that shit in America, and the cops would have such a good laugh before they hung up the phone. Okay, George, tell us about Splash.
All right. This was directed by Ron Howard.
For this podcast, we saw him acting, not directing, in American Graffiti, episode 44.
The story was written by Brian Grazer and Bruce J. Friedman, with a screenplay by Lowell Gans.
Brian Grazer is more a producer than a writer. We saw Spike Lee's Inside Man for episode 65 that he produced. Bruce J. Friedman wrote Stir Crazy, the Richard Pryor Gene Wilder movie, which I saw. Of Lowell Gans's work, the only one I've seen is City Slickers.
For awards, it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Writing Screenplay Written Directed for the Screen. I don't know why. And for the Golden Globes, it was nominated for Best Motion Picture, Comedy or Musical.
You know, for that screenplay thing, I don't know why either, but I watched an old Siskel and Ebert talk about this film. They also were impressed by the screenplay, so maybe there's just a lot of shitty screenplays in 85, and this is one of the better ones.
Maybe it was the cream of that particular slimy crop. For blurbs, IMDb says, a young man is reunited with a mermaid who saved him from drowning as a boy. He falls in love with her, not knowing who or what she is. That's fairly straightforward.
It's straightforward, although she could have not been a mermaid, he would have fallen over. The guy, well, we'll get into it, but he seems, he's a real horny bastard, just goes for it, regardless of where the woman's from. He knows nothing about her, and takes her right back to his house, so he don't give a fuck.
Well, she was scripted for him to not know anything about her, Joe, and she's an archetype that I will get to in a moment.
Indeed, but he doesn't care, that's my point.
Yeah. And then Amazon says, Tom Hanks is rescued at sea by the mermaid of his dreams.
Oh, that's inaccurate.
That's Amazon looking wistfully back at when they jerked off to Daryl Hannah walking around naked.
A Little Mermaid's arm, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. So, this is one of the shortest cast sections that we've done. Only 4 characters need to be defined before we dive into the waters of this summary.
See what you did there? Waters, I get it.
Yeah, Start with Alan Bauer. Our protagonist, he's incapable of loving anyone but someone he briefly met in childhood, but he doesn't know who she is, so all of his relationships fall short of his desires. He's the successful owner of a a produce shipping company, and seems to be a decent sort for someone in that position. If, as Joe said, a kind of horny and careless bastard. Played by Tom Hanks.
We last saw Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own, episode 114.
I last saw him a couple weeks ago when I watched Joe versus the Volcano.
Okay. Don't know why you would do that to yourself, but alrighty.
Then we have Freddie Bauer. Not Eddie Bauer, Freddie Bauer. Alan's pervy older brother. As a child, he would drop handfuls of change so that he could get low and look up women's skirts. As an adult, he drops handfuls of change so he can get low and do that, but not as low as he did as a child because he's played by John Candy.
I don't know if you remember Logan Jacobson George, but he was a comic I knew. He died around the same time as Joe Rocha. Logan's day job was working at a museum as a guard, and one of his duties was preventing guys from standing under the staircase to look up women's skirts. So that's the first thing I thought of when I saw those scenes. In any case, John Candy was last seen in Spaceballs, episode 127.
Yep. Then we have Madison. She's a manic pixie dream mermaid. And the romantic lead. That's her character. That is everything we need to know about her. Played by Daryl Hannah.
She was uncredited, but we last saw her in Crimes and Misdemeanors, episode 84. Films she was credited in that I've seen have been Kill Bill, both volumes.
And finally, we have Walter Kornbluth. Imagine if your conspiracy-screaming nerdy coworker was correct about chemtrails and found out that he was correct when everyone else did. That's this guy, only significantly less insufferable after the revelation. Played by Eugene Levy.
I first saw Eugene Levy, just like John Candy, on SCTV, the legendary Canadian sketch show. Beyond that, I don't know much of his other work. I never saw Schitt's Creek or American Pie.
I have seen American Pie. After 2 minutes of musically backed credits, we end up in a flashback to 20 years ago. Which, you know how much I hate that, Joe. You know how much I hate relative time references in movies that play in a world where time continues to move forward.
Yes, I'm afraid the filmmakers didn't realize years later there'd be 2 nerds watching their movie, breaking it down and being very, very pedantic about it.
So based on when this movie was released, that would be 1963 or 1964. We see young Alan and Freddie with their family on a sightseeing boat trip to Cape Cod. Freddie as a youngster is a little pervert, and I established that in the character introduction, so no need to rehash it. Alan, on the other hand, just likes staring at the water. He sees something and jumps off the boat to find out what it is. He finds a young lady, Mermaid. I don't think we really know that she's a mermaid at that point.
He certainly doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't. They're under the water and he's fine with everything. And he's safe, like he's not suffocating or anything.
No.
More than that, he's completely just enchanted by her. And then he's rescued against his will by the boat crew. And this breaks that young mermaid lady's heart.
For some bizarre reason. Yeah. Imagine you met somebody when you were, how old is he again? Like maybe 10?
Maybe 10. Basically when everything in my childhood happened. When I was like 10.
You meet someone for the first time as a 10-year-old, and you're really going to fall in love with them in that moment. I mean, so much in your life, you haven't even gone through puberty yet. Just all you're still pining for is someone you met when you fell into the water. Jumped into the water, which is like homicidal. Not homicidal, suicidal. Like, I would really worry about my kid if he just, I'm just going to jump off the boat because I see something in the water, I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm.
Seems like homicide's not just on my mind.
It's always on my mind.
In present day, or 1983-84 New York City, we see adult Alan at his produce shipping business. He's dealing with an irate customer. The cherries that the customer purchased are slimy and not fit for sale because Freddie lost a bet in a poker game.
Who was also slimy.
Yes, but he turns out to be a little bit better of a person. It's weird. Alan gets a phone call from his girlfriend, who breaks up with him. We get the distinct impression that he has commitment issues. This also means he will be free for the rest of the movie to pursue the romantic lead. And when I say romantic, please know that it is a stretch to define their relationship as such.
Is this the second movie where the lead gets broken up by the girlfriend over the phone? Because that was also in Office Space.
Yeah, and I'm sure it happens in a lot of movies. It's a very convenient way to have an emotional moment without ever having to pay an actor.
That's what I was about to say, yeah.
At a wedding for one of Alan's workers, he gets drunk and obnoxious. Later, he gets it into his head to take a cab from Manhattan to Cape Cod, no matter how expensive that is.
Well, it's pretty clear from this film that these two are very well off.
Yeah.
Apparently, the fish business back in the day made a lot of money. Maybe it still does.
Well, it's not the fishing business. It's just shipping produce.
Oh, whatever.
On the beach, we meet Walter Kornbluth and his two henchmen. Unbeknownst to us, he's there to look for mermaids.
Look, I think Eugene Levy is a very funny man, and the stuff I've seen him do, very, very funny, except in this movie. They try, and oh boy, is his character not funny.
He gets a little bit of a moment at the end of the movie. Alan charters a rinky-dink boat from, and piloted by, Fat Jack, who is played by Al Chesney. I could have sworn I'd seen him in more stuff, but his only credits are this character and an appearance as himself on Letterman in 1990.
I wonder what that was about.
I guess when I rocked the boat, I must have got a little water in the engine. I can fix it. I'm mechanical.
Yeah, that line made me laugh real hard. I can fix it. I'm mechanical. Like, it was perfect. It was a perfectly delivered line. I have no idea why this guy doesn't have more work. Banging on the motor doesn't work, so Fat Jack dives overboard. He's swimming back to shore to get his little boat. Alan falls overboard, losing his wallet.
Oh, God. I know that feeling.
Yeah, oof.
Although no mermaid came to help me out.
I know, right? He is rescued by a mermaid. He wakes up on a beach with her, naked, hiding behind some bushes. She heads for the water and swims away when he sees her. And she's got legs to do that running with.
Is this guy literally the only person who's ever fallen in the water with this woman? Because it seems a little weird. This mermaid first meets him when he's 10, because it's the same mermaid, and then meets him again years later.
And recognizes him.
And recognizes him, yes.
Even though he's being played by a different actor.
What is going on in her life? Has she just been waiting all these years for him to come back into the water?
Must have been, Joe. Must have been.
And why? And again, has no one else ever fallen or someone's going under the sea? It's scuba diving or anything.
Manic pixie dream mermaid, Joe. The mermaid finds his wallet and takes it to a sunken ship. Inside, she uses old maps to locate New York City, where Alan lives. Then she shows up naked at the Statue of Liberty. She gets arrested with Alan's wallet, so the cops call him to get her. When they meet, she is all smooches. She is a fish out of water the whole way back to his place. A very wet fish out of water, if you know what I mean. I mean... Once inside, between the copulations, Alan is off in the kitchen prepping a tray of foodstuffs. He tries to leave for work, but he can't make himself go, so they copulate again.
So here's what happened. This guy nearly drowns. He wakes up. There's this woman. The first time she kisses him is after he wakes up nearly drowning on the beach.
Yeah.
She starts making out with him. He doesn't go like, who are you or anything? Just like, all right, fine. Woman, of course a woman's making out with me. I'm Tom Hanks. So she starts making out with him, then decides, I got to get back in the water. And he goes, what's your number? Nothing like, who are you? Where are your clothes? What the fuck just happened? She splashes into the water and goes, well, I guess that's it. Then this is perfectly normal. And goes back to the city. We're not sure how. Did he get a cab? I don't know what happened there. There's no cell phone, so I don't know how he managed to make it back, but he does. And she's, meanwhile, under the water, goes, you know what? I apparently have never seen a man before. Don't know about clothes, which is weird, because the first time I see him, he's wearing clothes. And I know I can see people up on the ship wearing clothes, but for some reason, I don't know about clothes. All right. I decide, I have his wallet, and I look at his ID. I understand what an ID is, apparently. And I go look at an old map and go like, this is where he is. And I'm going to go find him. Why? I don't know. A mermaid. I got the whole sea to myself. Apparently.
No, apparently not. And you don't find that out until the very, very end of the movie. But let's keep going.
Was there not any mermaids, were there?
We'll get there.
Okay, you got to point it out to me.
Uh-huh. At work, Alan is singing zippity-doo-dah levels of happy, while Freddy is capitalistically sabotaging the quality assurance step of examining onions. Alone in the apartment, the mermaid sees an ad on TV for Bloomingdale's. The building doorman helps her get a cab there, where she goes on an 80s shopping spree. She may be entirely ignorant of surface-dwelling human customs, but how to use a man's credit cards is apparently genetically encoded in every female-presenting humanoid.
Here's someone who didn't think she needed clothes, then she watches TV. I don't know why it would be so fascinating to her. She sees better stuff under the sea, but okay, she watches TV and like, you know what? These women are clothes. I, too, have to get clothes. And I guess she somehow gets a hold of his credit card, although, wouldn't he have it in his wallet?
Joe, stop thinking. You gotta stop. If you don't stop thinking, we will never get through this summary. This movie is not a movie that you can think about and be happy. Maybe that's the problem with our week. Was this movie.
Who's the other shopping lady?
Oh, well, one store manager would make a nice addition to our show for color commentary on wardrobe.
Oh my God. Darling, darling, darling. That outfit, it's to die from. And what happened? You saw Annie Hall 100 times? That look is over.
Is that the one you're thinking of, Joe?
No, I'm thinking of Pretty Woman.
I am 100% certain that we have other women shopping scenes. The Mermaid finds an electronics store with a wall full of TVs showing everything, including that commercial staple of tri-state area broadcast television, Crazy Eddie. She is fascinated. Alan comes home, finding no mermaid. Doorman tells him where she went, so he goes there. He finds her in front of that wall of CRT TVs, all playing a Richard Simmons video that she is working out to. Also, because of all of the TVs, she knows English now.
What's your name?
It's hard to say in English.
Well, just say in your language.
All right. My name is...
That was a bunch of shattering TVs, and it made me laugh.
Okay, fair enough. But you would think that moment would clue him in that this isn't a human being.
You'd think, Joe. You'd think, but he was scripted to be oblivious.
All right, let's say you're in a relationship with a woman you just met, and she runs off with your credit card to Bloomingdale's and buys a whole bunch of shit. Wouldn't the first question to be like to you, from you to her, be like, what the fuck did you think you were doing? He doesn't care at all. This woman has just bought all these things without his permission with his credit card.
That's just how rich he is, Joe. They leave Bloomingdale's, and we start the real fish out of water part of the movie with someone not only unaccustomed to life in a big city, but unaccustomed to life with, legs and land and electrical stuff. And I promise that's the last time I say fish out of water. I used that twice, and it upset me when I realized that. She's fascinated by crossing lights. Alan asks questions that get no answers because that would make the movie too short. We get an obligatory, almost getting creamed by a cab driven by someone who will have an aneurysm within a week. During this scene, she is given a pronounceable name, Madison, because they're on Madison Avenue. It's supposed to be an honor to have a street named after you. Does that make it an insult to be named after a street?
I don't know.
She gets out of bed that night while he's sleeping to go take a bath. And this is where we see that her mermaid tail appears when she gets wet. Alan wakes up and asks if he can come in. Obviously not wanting to give up her secret yet, she says no, but then flops out of the bathtub onto the floor, making a big noise that makes Alan concerned for her. He ends up breaking the door down. Luckily, she's managed to dry off enough that her tail is now legs again. Disaster averted, or whatever.
Why does she feel the need not to tell him?
Good question, Joe.
I mean, he obviously doesn't give a shit who she is. I mean, she smooches on him and he's like, oh, this is great. He doesn't mind her running around naked. He doesn't mind her taking his credit card and going off to Bloomingdale's. So clearly this guy is A-okay with everything. Why would she think he'd freak out about the whole mermaid thing?
Yeah, good question, Joe. And when he does freak out about it, it's more because of how he found out than the fact of it.
Yeah, you don't want to find out in a tank full of water.
Before we get there. We don't want to spoil this decades-old movie. Before we spoil the decades-old movie, we go out to the water again to find Kornbluth suffocating because one of his incompetent henchmen has a chair leg on the airline. That henchman is reading a tabloid. Kornbluth kind of tries to help along critical thinking angles, I guess because he doesn't want to see his uneducated dumbass henchman reading conspiracy theories and woo nonsense. Then he notices Madison on the cover after she emerged from the ocean on Liberty Island. It occurs to him that she might just be the mermaid that he's been looking for. And I forgot to mention it earlier. In the whole rescuing him when he fell out of the boat thing, Kornbluth does catch a look at her. So he does know that there is a mermaid.
Yeah, although one thing I found really curious about when he makes that big jump looking at the paper, isn't it sort of like in Superman where Lex Luthor just figures out Superman can be hurt by kryptonite just by the most random way possible? Because I don't know if there's enough clues there for him to go, oh, this must be the mermaid because I see this picture of her in the paper.
Well, the thing is, he saw her face when they were under the water.
That's true. I guess he did get a brief look at
He's not recognizing a mermaid. He's recognizing that person.
I guess. Although she would look different in the water than out. But maybe not. Maybe her face is... the hair didn't get in her face or something when he saw her.
Yeah. So back in Manhattan, Madison is going through the same process of revelation that the aliens in Galaxy Quest had to go through, where they realized that TV was not real life. In Madison's case, she's watching Bonanza and is saddened at the sight of a man being shot and dying in the street. Alan has to stop her from crying because it's the crying that's the bad thing and not the fact that we watch people killing each other as entertainment. He explains that, oh, they're just actors playing pretend and it's funny if you think about it. I think Madison, before that line, would have done well on this show.
Especially if there was a story about a baby being put into a trash bag.
Yeah. I bet she wouldn't have been able to, not laugh at it hysterically for a very long time.
Boy, this episode, I'm making a lot of references to earlier work, aren't I?
We're thinking back to happier times, Joe. Again, we have to play the whole... though she's from the ocean, so she doesn't understand land-human customs thing. So when Alan gets her a gift in a box with a ribbon and bow, she thinks it's just lovely and has to be told that the real gift is inside the box. As I wrote that, I realized that I sound kind of like a curmudgeon, and that it must have been the mood I was in, and apparently still am. There's actually nothing wrong with this kind of stranger in a strange land trope. I mean, it's the whole premise of the film. So they're going to try to get some laughs out of Madison's inexperience. Like, it might not be terribly funny, but I can't ding it for being there. Oh, the gift is a snow globe with 2 dancing figures in it playing music, if anyone was wondering. Don't worry, it won't come up again.
Also, that is a weird gift for him to bring her. Nothing they've experienced so far brings up that globe, so why would he get it for her? Why would he think it's a good gift?
It looks like the only non-food, non-sea themed item he's ever bought and brought into his place. He takes her out into the city, this time, not alone and able to speak English. They stop by a fountain with a mermaid on top of it that he really likes. He attributes his love of the sea to an accident that he had as a kid, and Madison almost lets slip that she was there at the time. Awkward.
Which again, why? Why not just say it?
Good question, Joe. The next day at work, Freddie tells Alan that they have to go to a dinner thing because the President of the United States will be speaking there.
Why?
Alan asks...
Why is that there?
I don't care.
Why was that...
I don't care.
Well, I guess that leads to him getting arrested, but that could have been a senator or a congressman. I don't know why it had to be the president.
Could have been any place where there was security.
Yeah.
Alan asks if he can bring Madison to the dinner instead of Freddie, to which his brother responds by making fun of him and not at all getting jealous or upset that he's being asked to not go.
Freddie has never actually met this woman, right?
No, but he hears his brother talk about her.
So you would think you'd be like, hey, can I meet this woman at some point? I mean, we're brothers. We're in the same business together. We're obviously
I assume
somewhat
that's
close.
Just kind of gonna he's thinking that's just gonna happen eventually anyway.
It just seems weird that at some point he would say during that whole, oh, you want to bring her? That's great. Say, when am I going to meet this girl? It's very easy. They could have slipped that into the script.
They didn't have to slip it in there just because you want to know.
It would have made it more realistic.
Well, I think it's perfectly realistic for the brother to not be super focused on meeting the girl that his brother has the hots for.
His brother has been dumped. His brother's been very sad, said he can't meet any women. He's finally met a woman. You would want to meet her.
I'd want to meet her, but they haven't been together for so long that he would feel like he's being frozen out or something.
Oh, I'm not saying he feels frozen out.
No, but it's been a couple of days.
It's been a couple of days and he's already madly in love with this woman. I got to meet this girl.
I wouldn't necessarily. I'd just be happy for my brother. Anyway, they go to play some sports. John Candy and Tom Hanks go to play some sports.
Well, it's the John Candy part of the equation that makes it weird.
While playing racquetball, kind of, Alan tries to work through the oddities of Madison. Freddy, perversion aside, tries to make sense of the things in a context that would be acceptable because he cares about his brother.
Dude, these two really look like they could even remotely be related. John Candy and Tom Hanks do not in any way, shape, or form look like they could possibly be brothers.
I've seen some people that just really don't look like they would be related.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy it.
Look, there's plenty to ding this movie on. That's not, that's so far down the list, Joe.
This isn't dinging the film, but I have to say, even though most people have no idea who I'm talking about, boy, does John Candy look like Dan Frick. I had no appreciation just how much he would get mad. Fortunately, he doesn't listen to the podcast, but he would get mad when people say he looked like John Candy, but he really does.
Kornbluth is at the Museum of Natural History, and to my absolute delight, so is this guy.
Now, I want those doors closed, and I want them kept closed, and I want it quiet in here. Now, the prosecution has presented its case. And throughout these proceedings, Mr. Joel, you have not uttered one word in your defense. May I remind you, sir, you're on trial? Haven't you anything to say to the court?
Well, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to try a little different approach.
Perhaps, Mr. Joel, you should approach the bench. Son, it's now or never.
You know, Judge, they say justice is blind. I sure hope it ain't deaf.
What the fuck was that?
That is from the music video for Billy Joel's Keeping the Faith, released around the same time as this film.
Really? Why would you put that in there? It's got nothing to do with anything.
I was in the kitchen getting something to drink when this scene came on, and I heard that guy's voice from the movie, and I'm like, oh, it's that guy. With my excitement resembling my 5-year-old self on Christmas. What's he doing in this film? He is chastising Kornbluth.
This is what we came to hear? You call us and tell us that you have stretched the frontiers of paleontology and zoology, and we interrupt important, serious work to fly here at a moment's notice, and you give us mermaids? Don't call us, call the comic book companies.
That character is Dr. Ross and was played by Richard B. Shull. Back at the apartment, there has been a bit of a development. Madison had a necklace. It was actually the only clothing she had when she first showed up in Manhattan. She sold it to get money to buy that mermaid statue for Alan. They were going to tear it down, so she bought it and had it delivered to his apartment. I doubt that the floor was rated for what that fountain with water weighed.
Oh, yeah, there's no way she would even get it into the building.
When he asks why she did this, she says because she loves him. His response is one of gratitude, and he almost doesn't say that he loves her back, but he manages to pull it off. They kiss and presumably have sex again because they do a lot of that.
All right, George, help me out here. Other than being a really attractive woman.
No, there's nothing, Joe. There's nothing about this relationship or either of these characters that is worth getting wet or hard over. But they are scripted to fall in love with each other, so they fall in love with each other. That's the answer you're looking for.
Alrighty then.
Back at the Museum of Natural History, Kornbluth is experiencing the aftermath of his dressing down with the only person left in the room, his mentor, from when he first started out. He's the one that got Kornbluth to believe that there were mermaids in the first place. And he's not sold on the idea that Madison is one. He does give Kornbluth the idea that maybe he should just get her wet, and that would prove it.
Nice metaphor.
Yeah, well, Kornbluth takes that idea and runs with it. And by runs with it, I mean he stalks Madison and Alan with 2 buckets of water in his car. And when he sees his chance, he gets out with those 2 buckets, weaving in and around all the pedestrians on a busy New York City sidewalk, and then splashes a woman wearing a similar color coat as Madison, but who is not, in fact, Madison. Her partner does not take kindly to this and does some damage to Kornbluth.
Kornbluth is a scientist. Presumably he's an intelligent person. Why would he think, you know what, let me follow them through the street, as opposed to, I know where they live for some reason.
Because he's scripted to do so, Joe. That is the only reason anything in this film happens.
Why not just simply wait at the house for them and then do the whole bucket of water?
He'll do that later.
He does do that later. It's not, for some reason, it's not the first idea he has.
Madison and Alan are at a nice fancy restaurant. Alan is under the impression that Madison has to leave in the near future because of an immigration issue. That's not how Madison would put it, but since she's not saying anything at this point, it's as good a guess as any. He begins to weave this into talk of marrying in order for her to stay in the country, but then their food arrives. The conversation quickly derails and comes to a screeching halt, as does everything, including the piano music in the restaurant, when she takes her lobster and just starts eating it with her hands, biting through the shell like it's a hamburger.
Which is, a shocking thing to see, I'm sure. Although I don't know if the entire restaurant would stop and start staring, but okay. It's a comedy.
And I did find it amusing.
It is amusing. It's a very amusing scene. Besides the fact that I don't know why she still can't just tell him, but okay, whatever. He thinks it's an immigration issue. He wants to marry her so she can stay in the country. All right, fine. Here's what I don't understand at that point. All right, he's asking this woman he knows nothing about to marry him because he thinks it's an immigration issue. For some reason, she doesn't tell him. But she does have to get out of the country, or she says out of the country. She's got to get back in the water. George, why is that there? Because I don't know. Never at any point do we have it explained to us why she needs to get back into the sea.
As best as I could put together, she could only be out for a week without having to go back. Right? Like if she didn't go back to the sea within a week, she would forever be stuck on land.
Wow.
I don't know how any of that even mattered because she was in love with this guy. And was her plan to always get him to join her in the sea? That is the only thing I can think of to make any of this make any sense.
Your guess is as good as mine, and God knows the script doesn't tell us anything, which was Oscar nominated. So go on.
After dinner, the pair go ice skating in Rockefeller Center. For some reason, Madison, who has lived most of her life underwater with a tail and was ignorant of the concept of ice, is a better ice skater than me, who has practiced at least a couple of times in my life.
Oh my God, you're right. How does she not know about ice? You're right, I didn't even pick that up. You're right, she's never seen ice before.
Oh, this is what happens to water when it freezes? A, how did you not know that? B, what else have you seen that freezes? In the ocean. They sit down to talk, and Alan doesn't want to talk about how his nose is cold or his ears are red. He wants to ask her a question.
Madison, would you marry me?
Yeah, I left all the silence in there just for funsies.
This woman doesn't know anything. Why would she know what married means?
Good question, Joe. All right, so she says it's because she only has 3 days left, but doesn't explain at all what that means. And all of this doesn't sit with Alan very well, and he ends up getting snippy and sarcastic with her, causing her to run off. She has the good sense to take off her ice skates before she does. Alan, not so much, and he gets tackled to the ground for trying to run away wearing them. Alan spends the rest of a very rainy and thunderstormy night looking for her. By morning, Madison is considering just returning to the sea, but decides not to. She finds a sad and dejected Alan outside of where he works, and then just accepts his offer of marriage. Not the most auspicious way to start a long-term committed legal relationship.
She's never been to his work before, right?
Good point, Joe.
For someone who doesn't know anything, she sure can get around well.
Kornbluth and his broken arm have managed to acquire employment as a janitor in the building where Alan and Madison live. Or he's just faking it, whatever. He sees them come in, and when they take the elevator, he runs up the stairs. Thinking he's finally got them, he breaks open a fire hose installation, and as soon as he sees the whites of their eyes, he starts spraying. Unfortunately for him, it's not only not Madison and Alan, it's the exact same couple that he threw the water at earlier. Not only does this make him look like some kind of psycho stalker, but it earns him another ass-kicking.
What's in front of that building, George?
I don't know.
It has a doorman.
Oh, yeah.
How does he just get into this very fancy, expensive building to begin with?
Good question, Joe. While Kornbluth is getting his ass kicked, Alan is trying to figure out the fastest way that he and Madison can get married, since some places require blood tests and waiting periods for that when they don't or didn't for buying, handguns. Madison says that before they can get married, she has to tell him everything, but she can't tell right then for some unknown and ultimately unexplained reason. And the reason is not because I don't have a U.S. birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, or any of the things that I would need for us to get a marriage license.
I've never gotten married, obviously. Did you have to do that when you got married? Did you have to get your blood tests?
No.
Is that a real thing?
I didn't. And I did get married in New York State. So...
Yeah, I wonder if that was... I hear that a lot, but I wonder if that's made up because real people, I never hear, we got to go to a blood test.
You know what we can do? We can Google that later and satisfy our
the
curiosity.
audience can. I don't really give a shit. I just wanted to stop you. Ask another dumb question. Because that's my job on the show.
Apparently. Then they're at the dinner with the president. Kornbluth, again, has managed to disguise himself as a worker. This time, he's a waiter. In the kitchen, he finds some fire extinguishing equipment or plant watering equipment. I don't know, it's a tank with water in it that you press the thing to pressurize, like a big metal tank for an inadequately cool-looking super soaker. He wears this on his back under his waiter's coat. This does not look at all suspicious to the many Secret Service agents scattered about. That is sarcasm. He spots Madison, reaches for the nozzle, and is tackled and escorted out by the Secret Service. Right now is when Madison decides, now she can tell Alan everything, just not here at this very important dinner. So they get up in the middle of the president's speech and leave.
All right. Why does she decide in that moment?
I don't know, Joe. There is no answer to that question.
Don't get snippy with me. I did not write this movie, nor did I even pick it. This was one of our goddamn patrons.
But I need you to if you're going to ask questions that I can answer.
And then I won't have any role on the show.
There are answerable questions, Joe. Those exist.
Well, not by you.
Well, not about this movie, no. With Alan and Madison on the curb, Kornbluth is being detained only a few feet away. For reasons that chalk up to the movie wouldn't work otherwise, the Secret Service did not take the suspicious tanks of unknown and potentially dangerous fluid away from the crazy man yelling about mermaids. So when Kornbluth sees Madison, he's able to grab his water sprayer and spray her down.
I was right! Behold the mermaid!
Madison and her tail are quickly spirited away by secret government types, while Alan is in shock. Then, he too is taken away by mysterious government types. And then the last third of the movie has resident notes from E.T., Flight of the Navigator, and even Stranger Things. Joe, were you aware that underneath the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, there's a military-secured government research facility?
I didn't know till this film.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. In that facility, they have Alan standing in a tank of water with wires connected to him. He insists that he's not a fish. And is that really what he thinks of Madison as?
Good question. And he's in a tank completely nude with his hands over his genitalia.
Uh-huh. They bring Madison in as one would bring in a dolphin and dump her in the tank with him. When she tries to reach for him, he recoils. She goes underwater, and Dr. Ross says he's obviously not a merman, so they blindfold him, stick him in a van, and take him home, where he is immediately surrounded by a bunch of reporters asking all kinds of silly and inappropriate questions. Is it true she's also dating Burt Reynolds? Fuck you. His brother pulls up and rescues him from that throng and then brings him to work. In their office, Alan is feeling sorry for himself. Freddie, again, despite his perviness, has always been a fan of his brother and has wanted nothing for him but happiness.
Every day people meet and they fall in love every day, and look what I got. Look what you got. Yeah, let's look at what you got. Let's take a good look at what you got. People fall in love every day, huh? Is that what you said? Yeah. Yeah? Well, that's a crock. It doesn't work that way. Look, do you realize how happy you were with her? That is, of course, when you weren't driving yourself crazy. Every day, come on. Some people will never be that happy. I'll never be that happy.
What did you honestly think of that scene? Other than you think that means he's showing his love for his brother?
I'm kind of on Team Freddie on that. I don't think he's ever going to be that happy.
Here's the thing I found really... As someone who has not found love, I would hate to think that it would have to be... I have to find a fictional being to be happy. It's just like, what is this film telling me here? As someone who has not found love, that someday I'll have to find a a woman I know nothing about and she'll come up out of the sea. I mean, I don't know. I don't like the underlining premise here.
If there is a saving grace to this film, it's that, hey, people are different and you love who you love.
Oh my God, I wish that was the point of the film.
It's kind of there, but it's not as explicit as it should be. But that's kind of what Freddie is saying there. Like when he says, when you're not driving yourself crazy, because he's driving himself crazy over, arguably actually really important things. Like, where did she come from?
What is her actual name? What country does she come from?
But when you're not thinking about that, like your time that you spend together, you're happy. Well, that's because like there's not a single moment that you're not fucking her. And that tends to end very happily if you're a guy. But like that could have been a message in this film, but it was not there in a way it should have been.
No. And here's the thing. One way I've never been in love, but I've been close, and people I've had very close relationships with. I cannot imagine having any sort of intimate relationship with someone, unless I'm like paying for the service. I can't imagine having an intimate relationship with someone who I know nothing about. How can I really be in love with this person when I don't even know their real name?
No, he does know her real name. He just can't pronounce it. Back at the laboratory, they are running tests on Madison. They drop her back in her tank with Kornbluth watching. And one thing I did appreciate about the film is that despite the mythical aspects of the whole mermaid thing, they paid some attention to making her a realistic aquatic being. Like when we have animals in captivity, they behaviorally and sometimes physiologically adapt in very specific and unfortunate ways. For instance, orcas having their dorsal fin flopping over is associated with them having been born in captivity. When I was a kid, we had a fish tank, and there was always fear of the fish catching a disease called ick. Kornbluth looks at Madison and at her tail and sees that it's kind of shedding and falling apart.
Is ick a real thing?
Yeah.
Not a joke?
Yeah, it's a fish tank disease thing. Kornbluth expresses to Dr. Ross some concerns for the welfare of Madison. When this is met with insufficient compassion, Kornbluth goes on to describe Dr. Ross as a sadistic pig. Dr. Ross responds in a way that does not at all show us anything but that he is a sadistic pig. Then Kornbluth looks at Madison and has one of those, oh, what have I done moments. Freddy's words and some quality time with the mermaid fountain spur Alan to find Kornbluth about to have his teeth drilled at a dentist's office.
How would he do that?
Good question, Joe. He kicks the dentist out and a mild scuffle ensues, resulting in Kornbluth stabbing himself in the leg with Novocaine. Then they talk and Kornbluth expresses his regret. He also tells Alan that he can actually get him in to see Madison. So Alan drags Kornbluth and his numbed-up leg out of the dentist's office. That was a bit of good physical acting on Eugene Levy's part.
Sure.
I'm looking for, like, little nuggets here.
From the Siskel and Ebert review of this film, which they weren't in love with either, I have to say one idea they had, I think, would have made this a much better picture. But go ahead, finish.
Okay. So instead of 3 men in a lab coat, we have 3 men in 3 lab coats. I don't know why I felt like saying that.
It's not like 3 men and a baby, dude.
Yeah. Alan, Freddy, and Kornbluth march into the Museum of Natural History, all full of purpose and determination. They manage to bluff their way past the guards with some Swedish speak about large penises.
That's what always works for me.
They manage to effect a rescue of Madison, with Freddy sacrificing himself by staying behind as something of a decoy.
And that's the last we'll see of him.
Yep. When Dr. Ross shows up, he finds Freddy sitting on top of the tank with an improvised fishing pole. And I thought that was cute. Now, we are in the final scenes of the movie. They're chased around Manhattan in cars by the United States government. Kornbluth gets out to cause a diversion and to make up for the fact that this was all his fucking fault. Madison and Alan end up on a pier with helicopters from the Coast Guard closing in.
One part that really generally made me bust out laughing, it was when the military is driving after them, they can't catch up, and there's this cab in the way, and they tell the cab driver to move, and he says, screw you, I got a fare, whatever, and they get out and pick up the car and flip it over. I don't know why, but that made me laugh so hard. I guess because I didn't expect them to do that.
Yeah.
He's just like, well, screw you. And next thing you know, they're like turning the car. Like, I was like, holy shit.
Oh, now I remember. It's when Kornbluth says, nobody likes me when they first meet me.
Oh, that was amusing, yeah.
Yeah, I laughed at that. Alan tells Madison to go into the water. And at first, he can't bring himself to follow. When he sees that when himself is about to get captured, he jumps in the water anyway. He and Madison have a brief scuffle with some divers, win, and that's about it. They make out underwater, and then the credits roll.
He says to him, he too will become an underwater person.
Right.
For some reason. Something she's never brought up before.
Well, no, she did.
Why did she do that?
Remember when we were in the water when you were a child, and you felt safe, and you were okay there? That's because she's a mermaid, and she has some sort of magic aura that, if you're with her, you can breathe underwater and shit.
I did not get that. Okay.
And we do see that there's a giant underwater city, presumably full of mermaids.
Well, presumably, we'd never actually see any other mermaids.
No, but, I mean, budget. The end.
The end.
The end.
I'm going to start this off.
Okay.
Now, I thought, and like I said, I saw Siskel and Eberts, they were mixed on Daryl Hannah's performance. One of them thought she was not very good. The other thought she was fine.
You can only do so much as a Manic Pixie Dream Mermaid.
Yeah, she doesn't have a whole lot to do except to be pretty and buy clothes because women be shopping.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think once a casting suggestion they had, it would have made the film better. At the very least, it would have made it, I think, maybe more amusing to me anyway, is if John Candy was the one who falls in love with Daryl Hannah as opposed to Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks gets to be the sleazy brother. I think that would have been an interesting twist on things. Because usually the big heavyset guy is the comedic, he's the one we're all supposed to laugh at being a sleazebag. Let him be the lead.
I'd have bought that. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
I think that would have made him a better picture. I mean, the script is still shit.
It's still Oscar-nominated shit.
It's still Oscar-nominated shit. I don't know what the fuck is going on in 1984. I assume cocaine was involved?
No, cocaine was definitely involved in the making of this movie.
Yeah, but Manic Pixie Dream Girl, this is it. She initially can't even speak, which I guess is a miracle of feminism that he at least gave her lines, because I could have had the whole film where she says nothing. Yeah, I don't think this works. I think it belongs in 1984. Well, it belongs in 1974, maybe 1972. There is no characters here, especially the female character. Daryl Hannah.
The most well-developed characters are Freddie and Kornbluth.
I agree. I think that is 100% true, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, your turn.
I'll sign on to all of that and say that I hate movies that start with relative time references.
Oh, God. You need to get over that.
Yeah, but I don't need to, you've already said it all. I brought up plenty of things in the fucking, it was a silly movie. You can be silly and smart. And it's silly, but not smart enough to stand the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, if it maybe had been sillier, maybe I would have enjoyed it more, because then I'm like, okay, this isn't even remotely realistic. They're clearly just going for the laughs. Then maybe I would have enjoyed this more. But they're trying to keep it real, but unreal at the same time.
Yeah, and they didn't do a good job of...
Not a good balance.
They did sporadically, like I said, with making the captivity thing look like something that was making her sick, right? But they didn't develop it at all. They didn't even really remark on it beyond the one scene. There was no lasting effect from it. No. I'm done with the movie too, Joe. I was...
All right, then let's move on.
Yeah.
This was a Patriots Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are The Fisher King, 1991, The Piano Teacher, 2001, and The Lincoln Lawyer, 2011. If you want to vote but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, we'll be talking about Beginners from 2010.
Do you recall this film?
I have no idea what this is about.
This is with Ewan McGregor and his gay dad.
All right.
So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening, and vote blue.
Now I'm George Romaga. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
Hi.
Hi. Are you okay?
Yeah,
Well, why wouldn't you let me in?
I was shy.
You were shy? After the car and the elevator and the bedroom and on top of the refrigerator, you were shy?
I was shy.
She was shy.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romaca. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
He attributes his love of the sea to an accident that he had as a kid. And Madeline, oh my God.
Medicine?
with the voice to text, so many times turned Madison into medicine. So, Joe, I'm going to ask your question of you.
Okay, go ahead.
Why is breakfast cereal not seen as a form of soup?
George, that's a very good question. Good question, George.
Well, you wrote it.